We now move to the working session 3 titled India at the Frontiers of Technology and Innovation. Technology today is a key driver of growth and global influence. India's achievement from digital systems and space exploration to healthcare and automation are gaining worldwide attention. This discussion will explore how these innovations can serve national priorities while also contributing to the global technological landscape. We have with us today some of the best minds in India and the world to reflect upon these issues. To chair the session, we have Professor Amit Shovon, who is a development economist and an innovation scholar. He is a professor at the Center for the Study of World Economy, SIS JNU, where he has taught for over 3 years. Welcome, sir. Three decades. As panelists, we have Mr. Anirudh Sharma, who is co-founder and CEO of Digantara, India's first space situational awareness company. He founded Digantara at the age of 19 and today it is a global leader in space surveillance and intelligence with operations in India, US and Singapore. Welcome, Mr. Sharma. We have Shri Kiran Karnik, Chairperson, HelpAge India. He is a columnist and author who describes himself as a public unintellectual. He was widely recognized for his work in the IT sector as President NASSCOM. He has been conferred many awards including the Padma Shri. Welcome, Shri Karnik. Professor Santanu Chaudhury teaches in the Department of Electrical Engineering, IIT Delhi, where he has also served as Dean, Undergraduate Studies and Chair Professor. He has served as Director IIT Jodhpur and Director CSIR, Central Electronics Research Institute. Welcome, Professor Chaudhury. I may now request Dr. Sakti Prasad Sri Chandan to welcome the dignitaries. ठीक है ठीक है I now request Professor Amit Shovon to take over the proceedings of the session.
Thank you very much. Not the right time to start a session. It's 10 past 1. I mean, everybody must be very hungry. We'll try to round it up as soon as possible, but try to make it a very interesting session. Now, this session is about technology. And I would not waste too much time, but just take a couple of minutes to introduce to you the essence of the moot points of discussion today. What is technology? It's application of knowledge for practical purposes, to be able to do new things, to do things better, to do things more efficiently. I mean, from simple stone tools for hunting and gathering in the prehistoric age to advanced AI and robotics in the modern age, currently, everything is technology. Technology has been a key driving force navigating human civilization towards progress and prosperity throughout. However, it has become a very, very important tool in both geopolitical and geo-economic strategies, fundamentally reshaping global power dynamics. A tool that nations can leverage for military, economic, and diplomatic goals in their pursuit of national interest. I'll just take one example from history to set the tone for the discussion. How technology can change and shape geopolitics. At the age of exploration, if we go back to the age of exploration, 15th to 17th century, when seafarers for European countries explored, colonized, and conquered regions across the globe and opened up maritime routes. What was the key technological driver of this? Maritime technology. Who were the initial innovators? The Spanish and the Portuguese. But who acquired maritime supremacy? The Dutch, as a latecomer. And finally, their maritime technological supremacy didn't last very long, because we all know that subsequent 2 centuries were the century of the British, who dominated the global political and economic scenario. So, 2 lessons from this example. First, technological supremacy. For technological supremacy, you don't have to be the first innovator. You can leapfrog even after being a late starter. Lesson number 2, technological supremacy is not permanent in nature. You can be overtaken by any competitor at any time. Now, with this example, let us now bring ourselves back to the present era and see where we are. The world has entered the 4th phase of industrial revolution, where technological advancement is proceeding along several nodes: AI, robotics, big data, Internet of Things, space, surveillance. Each node is not an isolated node of prosperity for nations, but are interlinked and also act as major geopolitical tools. That is what we would like to discuss today. We have a very distinguished panel of experts: Mr. Sharma, who is a young and dynamic entrepreneur leading India's ascent in the space technology; Professor Santanu Chaudhury, who is an expert on AI and robotics; and Mr. Kiran Karnik, who needs no introduction, has been a leading figure in India's tryst with the 3rd industrial revolution, when the world entered the information age. I must take half a minute to explain that we are very differently poised now in the 4th industrial revolution. In the 3rd industrial revolution, India was catching up. And it did catch up very, very successfully. And it created a niche for itself in the world in this IT revolution. But are we really going to be remaining as a catching up country? Or are we aiming to push the frontiers of knowledge now when we are entering the 4th? We have already entered the 4th industrial revolution. Let's hear from the experts. I would request each of my panelists, we will do it in a more conversational mode. I will request each of the panelists to give their views, maybe for 7 to 10 minutes each, and then we can come back, round it up with discussions from the floor as well as some more comments. So if you can restrict your time to about 7 minutes, Mr. Sharma.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Professor. My name is Anirudh Sharma. I'm one of the co-founders and CEO of a company called Digantara. Maybe I will put the lens of technology building from my journey and how all of it started for us. So back in 2018, 2019, India did not have a private space tech program. That is mainly because we didn't have any legal framework or policies to support developing private space tech companies in India, where we develop the entire full stack development from building satellites to building rockets, launching of satellites and operation of satellites. It was mostly ISRO who was working mainly towards building of these satellites for both military and civil use cases. As a country, we started our space program more on the civilian side than on the military side, whereas US and USSR, Russia, started more of a military program than a civil space program. When we were starting this company back in 2018, we had no background to space tech. My education background is computer science. I dropped out of university when I was starting building this company. It was more of an accident because when we were starting out, there were no experts who could build a private space tech company out of India. So back in those days, we started to work on developing a satellite that could basically track and monitor objects in space. So the reason we started working on this was because when we've seen the advent of change of technology in aviation sector, we saw that the space sector is growing rapidly. When we started, we had around 2,000 satellites in orbit. So just to give you more statistics on space, from 2,000 satellites in 2019 to 16,000 satellites right now. So that's the growth that we have seen in space industry. And India's share in this is only 184 satellites, in which almost 80 satellites are active. That's very, very low at this point in time because we don't have private space tech players leading the game for India, both on the military and civil side. Given all of this, we thought that the government is now working towards opening up this sector for private space industry. We should work towards building capability for the country. When we started looking at applications, we had communication satellites, we had remote sensing satellites. More or less all these satellites were backdrop for everything that happens on critical side for the country, from navigations to communication, email exchanges, everything which includes stock market operation is dependent on satellite activity. So with this idea, we started thinking towards what could be the next era for space tech and how can we lead the way in building technology and capabilities for the country. That's when we started to work on a very specific domain called space domain awareness. What that means is tracking of every single satellite in space. Just to make it simple, what we're building is more or less Google Maps, but for space, because you need surveillance and you need navigation capabilities for orbits, for your satellites to move in those orbits. So that's when we started working on this very specific domain, and we were the only company in India starting to work on this particular topic, given our share in space sector was very low. Given all this background, back then we had two challenges. The first challenge was I had no credibility to build a space tech company because I did not finish my undergraduation. The second thing was doing anything in space tech requires a lot of money and a lot of funding. And the only customer for everything that we are building is government. And back in 2019, we didn't even have a policy, or nobody in the government even started talking about privatizing space sector. It only happened in 2020, given there were few space tech companies starting to work on several different applications. Given these two challenges, one of the main things that we had to solve for was the credibility problem. We solved that by having a patent that could, the patent is all about tracking of object in space using a LiDAR system. So I'll make this very simple from technology standpoint. What we do is basically use laser-based systems in orbit. Given current infrastructure focuses on ground-based systems to track satellites or even aircrafts, we use radars. We wanted to build something that is more sophisticated, that's more space-based, so that we don't have to deal with atmospheric distortions. So we started building a system that we've launched now to space. We've launched 3 satellites so far to space. So this was the first problem that we solved by having credibility, by building this patent, building a prototype out with the support of Indian Institute of Science. We started this company within the Indian Institute of Science ecosystem, given they had established infrastructure. The second thing was funding. We didn't have a lot of government schemes to support startups, like at least in deep tech sectors, for us to be able to build anything from ground up, because we are a risk-averse country. We don't want to take that bet of failure. So we didn't have a lot of capital access when we started. So we built our first satellite with around 40 lakh rupees. This was a very tiny satellite that we built with around 40 lakh rupees, and we asked ISRO if they could launch this on one of their experimental platforms. So we were the first private company to launch a space weather sensor on one of these ISRO missions where we tested our technology in space. That gave a lot of boost to private ecosystem. At this point in time, I would say from 2020 to 2025, a lot of things in India has changed, mainly towards funding. We have a lot of private investors at this point in time, venture capital, funding space tech or even deep tech sectors like semiconductors, biotech, AI, robotics. We didn't have this back in 2018, 2019. Given all this background, we started to work on launching India's first space-to-space surveillance satellite, which we launched in the year 2025 in January on SpaceX. So this was world's first satellite that could potentially track every object in space. Now the interesting part is we were at the right time, right place, given all the global order and geopolitics. technology, like you rightly mentioned, acts as a right tool for geopolitical negotiations. So today, one example that I can give is when the Russia and Ukraine war was happening, there were a lot of satellite activity that was supporting Russia to launch certain missiles on Ukraine. As a company, we were monitoring every single activity that Russian satellites were doing over Ukraine for the Americans. At that point in time, one of the interesting patterns that we saw was they were using satellites to guide missiles to pinpoint to locations on Ukraine for them to be able to launch a missile. So satellite activity has a lot of impact on war. Given all of this, US used Starlink as one of their tools for negotiation, and Starlink is the only space-based internet satellite constellation that provides global coverage at this point in time, and that becomes a tap for any country to negotiate. So today, what we're building is a constellation of satellite for sovereign needs, and that's when we realized every country will look towards building sovereign capability for its own, and even Europe right now has moved away from depending on American satellite constellation. That's mainly because during a crisis kind of a scenario, you need technology and you need your own technology to support your country's needs. And that is something I think which is very important given everything that's happening in the world. Technology plays a very important role to be able to have that power for negotiation to change the world order.
Thank you so much. Thank you indeed for your very precise and context-specific presentation on your own experience. I would move to Professor Chaudhury first for his comments, please.
Thank you, Amit. I think you talked about fourth industrial revolution. We are definitely there. But possibly if we are looking at India 2047, we have to think about where we shall move from fourth industrial revolution to possibly what we are talking about in a slightly more science fictional way, fifth industrial revolution, where it's not automation, but automation and human coexisting and driving the production forces. Because this is, I think, the key for India's development agenda. Because if we are looking at technology, we have to look at technology with human being as a part of it. The point is that India has an advantage of population. And we have a very large proportion of younger population who are there and who are very creative, technologically productive and capable. So the question is that how technology can really make this entire advantage that we have in terms of population converted into economic wealth. I think that is the key role of today's where technology is progressing. Now look at just simply, I have just listed few technology areas which are progressing across the world and dominating the economy. Currently is AI, communication technology, energy, and health. Let's just take four of these. If you take four of these and look at globally, even the Indians in terms of innovation capability have actually excelled and have shown a very significant contributions. But is it happening in this country? Not necessarily. Now, another very important thing is that these technologies today also does not have country-specific barriers. So therefore, the economy itself is changing, according to me, that it's going beyond geopolitical separations as per the country to becoming economic entities which are pan-country. And in that context, human resource has to play a key role. And if India focus of Indians as such, in terms of enterprises really focus in that area, Indians will become actually global power. It's not only the country becomes powerful when their people become really economically rich and powerful. Now look at AI. Now, if we look at AI, today the entire domination is by a technology which is more machine-centric rather than human-centric. But if you go back and try to look at how the brain operates, what is the basic essence of the brain, and brain is very, very energy efficient. So today's energy, major challenge of AI is energy. So if you can shift your attitude and look at with new perspective to technology, with more people looking at it, analyzing it, understanding it, then there is a possibility of breakthroughs and which can even solve your energy problem. So now what is important is we have to look at things in a different way. There has to be what we call tectonic shift in terms of looking at technology, and that's exactly happening. If you look at this year itself, I think even 2 years back, the maximum number of neuroscience motivated AI patents submitted was maximum by IBM. Now, if you look into it, this whole shift is important. At the same point, if you look at health, the India population dividend actually gives me the diversity of the health problem and technology to be developed in that space. And the super convergence which is happening from health, AI, energy and everything put together gives rise to new generation of industries and startups which are actually coming up across the world, also in India, will push our economic frontier in terms of productivity at a different level. Even it is projected that human life may move to 125 years. If it moves to 125 years, there has to be enough economic incentive for people to be successful and their life also becomes more productive. And therefore the population dividend, how it is to be exploited, not only getting limited within the resources in a country, but globally exploiting the resources is a new economic model which will be dominated and determined by the technology progress. But why will India go there? The question comes up is, if you look at it, that the percentage of GDP which is going to R&D today in India is possibly one of the lowest among the countries who are at the frontier and trying to do frontier research and technology development. Now, this has to change. Until and unless that changes, we cannot really make use of the huge brain power that we have. We are actually missing out on that. If you look at this education, we have a privileged class sitting in IIT, sitting in JNUs, but there's a huge talent beyond that. Technology can enable these people to come into and actually really become productive and contribute to the economy. These technologies are enabling it, technologies are available to be exploited. There is a productivity, there is a challenge, there is a market. It's only the question how you plan and direct things in proper direction. India has a potential, and that potential has to be realized by our perspective and attitudes, which has to have a different direction to think about and not in a traditional way. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shantanu, for this very, very precise and important message to all of us. I now turn the mic to Mr. Kiran Karnik.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here, and I want to thank the organizers, particularly SIS, for inviting me. Just sharing a few thoughts with no elaboration. First, when I thought of what am I going to say, and I made all kinds of notes, and I said, what can I say that you can't pick up from ChatGPT, for example? What is it that AI will give you that is, what am I going to say that's very different from what you pick up from there, or from Gen AI, latest things which are there? And, I kept thinking maybe facts and figures, all very important, the various points that are there, and how they impinge on our lives. But that's something you can all look up and probably have and might know better than me. So then I looked a little more and thought about what is it that is different from AI. One, of course, is opinions. You can have an opinion, which may or may not be fact, it's an opinion. And if you talk of the future, then you have much more leeway, because what one says, the other can say, and even your most sophisticated Gen AI model will not be able to precisely predict the future. So that gives us a lot of leeway when we look ahead. So this session, fortunately, is looking ahead. But then I decided to look back a bit and say, what kinds of things would AI have done which a human being might have done or has done in some way better? And I want to give you two most simplistic examples. There's a time when animals, horses in particular, for example, in many countries, say the US, were used as means to carry a lot of people or luggage or groups of people through stagecoaches or a fast mail. Many of you who are from a slightly older generation may recall reading things about the so-called Pony Express that delivered things very fast by quickly having a relay of ponies. So look at how can you make it faster. One way was the Pony Express model. When the horse tires out, you change, get a newer horse and go further. Another which AI might have come up with was how do you make the horse more efficient? Can you do something to make it, something with the horseshoe, something in the feed? Can you give it some rest while it's moving? Might have come up with very clever things. It might even have suggested that look at a genetic change in the horses. But it's very unlikely that even Gen AI would have come up saying, hey, forget the horse, let's invent an automobile. That is the difference to me of what a human being might do, which a machine, the most sophisticated one at least today, cannot yet do, which is to imagine, think differently and innovate on a completely different plane. It's not solving the given problem, it's taking it outside, looking at the broader picture and looking at a whole host of different ways of looking at it. And I think that's important. Therefore, when we talk of technology, I think it's very important to keep in mind what innovation. You just heard Anirudh mention how he, in a sense, did a technology reversal from what used to be done from the ground, which is yet being done from the ground. Space situational awareness, tracking satellites, finding which is where, tracking space debris. He's doing it from space, which cuts off all the attenuation that the atmosphere gives you and probably is able to do it in a different way and more efficiently. An innovative way of using similar technologies put together in a different way. And I think that is a key part of what we need to do as we look ahead. And I mention all this at some comparative length in my talk because this, to me, is a special genius of India. When you look at what is it that Indians traditionally have done best, it is what popular term for it now, which has gone round the world and has become part of the English language, jugaad. Jugaad is improvisation. It's not even innovation, it's improvisation. You have a problem, how do you fix it? The guy in the counter in front of you when you're waiting in a long queue wants to go off for tea, and the improvisation can be to persuade him, talk to him, or put across a 10 rupee note or a 100 rupee note. Improvisation. Who else does it in the world? There's a long queue, you can't wait, you don't want to get to the counter and bribe him. What do? You go around and do that. When the left side of the road is occupied, what do? You drive on the right side of the road. When the pavement road is full, then the motorbikes all drive on the pavement. It's terrible, it's chaotic, it's indisciplined, but it tells you what's in our head. We're always trying to find a solution which is different, which is not run of the mill. And that to me is a very, very important part of what we have proven. If I look at improvisation, which we have done well, look at innovation, we have done very well. A lot of things, we have moved up the innovation index. We had far behind. Of course, the index is wrong, but that's all our story. With any index where we don't do well, that's wrong. But we have moved up genuinely, and we have done some great innovations here. The innovations have been mainly not in products so much as in processes and business models. Business models we excel at, and I can give you some very exciting examples and very entertaining ones, but I won't. The business models are different. From my own industry, just a one-sentence example of a business model, that if you can do work by outsourcing it to the guy across the road, if your secretary is sitting in the room next door, why not 10,000 miles away? And just that's exactly what we did in India with the IT industry, with not just outsourcing, but offshoring, putting it somewhere else. And thanks to good communication technologies, we could do it. So we've been good at that, but we have not been good at the next steps. From innovation, how do you get to invention? And invention has not been our forte for a long time, except, theoretical innovations, almost metaphysical, like inventing zero or inventing other things which we won't get into now. But that has been our skill. So if I look at how we can capitalize on what we have, our core asset, which is talent, we then need to begin to see what do we do to really make the most of it. And to me, making the most of it means using it certainly for technology development, and you heard a lot of that from both the earlier panelists. You heard a good introduction by Professor Ray. But what can we do beyond that which is different, unique and special in the years ahead, where we will be number two in most technologies for a long time to come. Let's not delude ourselves. But what we can do, which few other countries can do, is to innovate and to try and create different business models. That requires innovation, and innovation requires diverse thinking, it requires diversity, it requires divergent thinking, and that's something which we should treasure and cherish, the diversity that's there in this country. We have it, we should not give it. One country, one everything is fine, one country, one language, one country, one culture. Let's not make it one country, one thinking. We cannot group think, we have to think differently and divergent thinking. Finally, a philosophy from my 25 years in ISRO, which I can take the credit or the blame for articulating, though many people did it. The success comes from divergent thinking, but congruent action.
Right.
Think different ways, pick what you want to do, but when you do it, converge. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much indeed. I think we have already set the stage for a very exciting discussion point. And the main takeaways that I get from my very distinguished speakers are, number one, there are problems which are preventing India to actually take the paradigm shift, make the paradigm shift. In fact, just following up on what Mr. Karnik hinted at, yes, we are very good in Jugaad. But, Jugaad is not going to lead us to inventions and frontiers. So, how do we take that leap? And we have done excellently well in high-tech sectors. For instance, IT, BT, IT, biotechnology and pharmaceuticals. But our expertise gets limited to more routine, skilled-oriented applications in these sectors rather than being on the frontiers of this sector. We are very good in generic production in medicines, but we have not really discovered a drug that has made a difference in the world. Likewise, in IT also, very few new products. We are very good in coding, we are very good in customization. So, beyond Jugaad, beyond these lower end of the high-end sectors, how we move to the high end, we have got some solutions also. You see, one problem that has been identified is the risk-averse nature of all of us. We do not invest in risky propositions, and investing in R&D is intrinsically risky. Second, India is not spending enough, Professor Chaudhury has pointed out, on R&D. So, if we do not spend on R&D, we are not going to be able to tap the enormous potential that we have in terms of our demographic dividend. So, let us now focus our attention on what to do, how to go ahead with this. One point is diversity. Yes, we must acknowledge that we do have a diverse population, which is extremely amenable to thinking differently and giving different perspectives, which is the key to innovation. So what are the other factors that could nurture creativity and innovation in this country to make us ready for 2047? I begin with Anirudh.
I would take an example from space sector again, given that's the only thing that I've known for a very long time. So in space industry, there is something called capacity planning and capacity development that we do when we have to do any mission. So for example, in 2002, SpaceX was started, and they launched their first rocket probably in 2009 called Falcon 1. Today we have reusable launch vehicle, which we thought was science fiction. Now rockets can go up and come back and land in the same position where it was launched. And we're building capabilities for lunar orbits. So at this point in time, we're doing moon expeditions, Mars expeditions. So drawing the analogy of all of the developments that we have done in the space sector globally, one of the most important things that we'll have to change in this country is being very reactive for developing anything. So for example, there was a war recently, and now we all of a sudden we need a lot of radars to protect ourselves from missiles. We didn't plan for it. We need it because it was reactive in nature. So which means there is progress that we'll have to do in technology development. It's called TRLs, technology readiness levels. So you'll have to progress from 1 to 9 systematically. So in India, we have this problem of jumping from 1 to 9 without even going through the development phase, where it's most important for you to build any capacity. Given all these problems, I think for us it is very important, if we have to grow and grow progressively towards building capacity for the country, we'll have to plan for it and invest in that today to expect return probably in 2047. And that is the same philosophy that we follow in space industry, because we don't get our investments back, ROI back in 1 year, 2 year. It's more or less a 10-year horizon for us to be able to get our investments back. And that is something that we plan on every single day for us to be able to build a successful business, being in a sector which is very high risk. One thing that I can say from an example that has happened to me personally is that when we started working with the United Nations, so they mentioned to us that it took almost 60 years for them to build something like ICAO, which is International Civil Aviation Organization, that basically regulates traffic in airspace at this point in time. We don't have a similar system for space, but they have to start working on that right now for us to be able to develop something for space, because what we thought was fiction today is no more fiction. We have companies that are building commercial space stations where you can go and live in space. For that, you need regulations, you need mechanisms for you to understand where each and every object is. Just today, today we don't have any risks in aviation sector given all the traffic that we manage, but we do have similar risks in space. To solve for that, we are working on capacity development at this point in time. That would not solve the problems for today, but it would solve the problems for the future. And one last point that I would like to make is from a book that I read on the space industry called When Heavens Went on Sale. So this book mentions a very good quote, which I think is true, given everything that's happening with the American administration and the global order today. That quote goes like this: those who control space today might as well control the future of humanity, because more or less everybody in this particular planet is dependent on space.
Thank you, Thank you, Anirudh, for concluding your remarks with this brilliant quote. I request Professor Chaudhury Santanu, please come in, please.
Yeah. Actually, I shall just continue on that point which I was talking about earlier, that, see, what is our advantage? The advantage of this country is a population and bright young minds who are very creative. So the point also I stressed upon is that the technology development is a function of the number of people investing their effort into it. And there has to be a model which is distinct from the model which advanced countries have adopted so far in terms of automation or reducing maybe the human involvement in the technology development. Therefore, this shift in thinking is very, very important if India has to be a driving force in the space of industry. We already have an example of a startup on this stage itself, and there are so many startups which are coming up. And if you look at the kind of exciting technologies they are actually engaged in, and if we can sustain them and support them, and if we don't expect that they will jump to TRL 9 overnight, then there can be many such new technologies coming up, because we have diversity of humanity, diversity of thinking, diversity of culture in the population. And if you look at even from the pure theory of evolution, diversity encourages growth. Diversity encourages the survivability of a particular trait. So that diversity which is there in the Indian population today, I think is the biggest strength for any kind of technology transformation coming in. See, we are talking about AI. Now, AI requires data. Just look at it. AI requires data. And India possibly has a largest source and variety of data for any new technology to develop in that space. And I gave you example is that how to look at AI in a different way. Say, for example, human brain is the biggest inspiration of AI. And how can we look at that from different angles with different of us from different disciplines looking at it with an angle which can give us a different build-up for AI altogether. Now, this whole approach has to be rethought, and rethinking and reimagining the whole technology landscape is what India can do, and that's what is required for 2047. Because 2047, we need to have a sustainable world where we can live, and it's not that we shall have using huge energy, increasing carbon footprint by a sophisticated technology. So therefore, we need to look back to ourselves, look back to nature, look back to sustainable development, and that creativity can only come in if the diversity of thought that Indian population really has can contribute to this technology and science development. Thank you.
Thank you. You have the last word.
Thank you. Just some brief points for the question which you asked quite sharply, Professor Ray, which is how do we now look ahead? How do we plan for 2047 or beyond? And I would say 3 or 4 very specific things, again, no elaboration, but just specific things which you might want to do. One, we need to invest much more in research and development. And just to give you that more stark within this motherhood statement, today we invest about less than 0.7% of our GDP in R&D. The Chinese are at least 4 to 5 times that by any count. Their economy is 4 to 5 times ours. So they're investing 15 to 20 times as much as we are. Then you don't have to ask the question that in 1990 we were almost on the same plane. In fact, in many we were ahead of them. Why are we so far behind today? Because they invested so much more. That's only part of the answer, but that's one. So up our development spending hugely. Where do it come from? It's difficult, but we need to change our focus in 2 areas. One, change the focus from so-called production-linked incentives. Economists here will tell you all about it, which were intended to create jobs. They don't really create that many jobs. But that apart, what you need is not that. It is not a sustainable model. You need development-linked initiatives which create the industry, which will create jobs, rather than investing in production-linked initiatives where somebody can walk off as soon as the incentive is over. Once something is set up here, they will be here. So focus on employment is right, but the focus should be shifted from production to development, and production will happen automatically. Third, when you look ahead, you begin to see the importance of, we talked of the more glamorous, sexy, as the Americans would say, technologies, space, computers, robotics, AI, but let's not forget biology and human genetics. That's going to be key. In 2047, most of you younger people here will have at least 5 or 6, artificial things in your body. I have 2 screws in one knee. Many people have hearing aids. Some people have, lenses implanted, all very common. Some people have heart implants. You have all implants. So any of your organ that goes out of order will be replaced. So you may live forever, good or bad, you decide, but there's going to be a completely new sort of thing. And if we are to be part of this, we need to also invest and look at genetics and biology, in which we are quite good actually, and we're neglecting those sectors in the haste to get first to computers and technology. Important in themselves, but there are more things. The other part of the focus is to stay clearly focused for our own good or benefit or development. In the last session I heard something which the Chinese proverb says it all. Hide your power, bide your time. Don't go chest beating and say we are the best. We are not the best. Let me repeat, at the cost of being very unpopular. We are behind in every field. But we have some great possibilities and we need to get there. For that you need to focus. We can't afford investments in vanity projects. And let me give one example, again, which will make it very unpopular because it's the flavor of the day, human spaceflight. Why do we want humans up there? To say we're the third, we're the fourth, we're the second. What for? Today, robots can do everything functionally that a human can do in space at 1/10 or 1/100th the risk and probably 1/3 or 1/4 the cost. Not a popular thing to say because everybody is, great about having an Indian in space, maybe a woman in space. How great that sounds, yes. But let's be practical about where we put our money. Last point, as we look ahead, we need to look ahead, not back. The whole country and the agenda setting by everybody from media to leaders is looking back. What was wrong, what was done not correctly, who victimized us, who did what to him. Let's look ahead. That's important. If you want to look ahead, then look ahead. Don't keep looking in the rear view mirror when you're driving. You have an accident. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we can I'm asking the organizers, can we have 5 minutes? Okay. So, questions from the floor. Yes, everybody is hungry. Huh? Yes. Where? Okay. Yes, please. Yes.
Thank you for the talk. I am Vanshita. I am a PhD scholar at the Center for European Studies here. So my question, I would leave it to the chair to direct it to whoever because it's a mix of all the things that have been discussed. So from what I gather, what Mr. Sharma said was more focused on what the sovereign needs of a country are in terms of technological development. And from what Professor Chaudhury said, it was more focused on the development of economic wealth while keeping human resources at the center. So do you think there are different priorities, different approaches that the government can take in promoting these two specific needs in terms of public versus private investment and those kinds of business models? And if you think there are, any of you illuminate on that? What different models the government can take for these two different priorities?
Right. Okay. Any other questions? Yes, please.
Thank you for the very insightful panel. I had a question when there were discussions around the definition of innovation per se and the not being able to move from innovation to invention. A lot of the trends in India particularly has been innovation has not been prioritized. Instead, imitation has been followed in the garb of innovation. For some startups, including Coup, that followed the same algorithms and platform structure as Twitter. So how can we as a country move from the mentality and focus on actual innovation instead of imitation?
Right.
What are some of the concrete action plans that the panelists would suggest?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, we can start the response before we close up for lunch. Okay. The first
Excuse
question.
Me,
yeah.
I have one more question.
Yes.
To Mr. Sharma. You have talked about space sector. So I have since government has opened it for the private sector, many of the space startups have sprung up like Skyroot or others as well. So my question is, what are the challenges that still faces the sector, space sector, and what solutions do you propose in that regard?
Okay, so we begin with the last question. Maybe take half a minute or so to summarize. Oh, yes.
My question is to Professor Kiran Karnik. Is technology autonomous? Or is technology autonomous?
Okay. Yes.
So on the space side of things, while government has created a body at this point in time to promote and regulate space activities, and this body is called InSpace. While all of this is happening at this point in time, which are all positive, but what we lack at this point in time is government being the anchor customer for most of these things. Because the only way the sector can succeed is when government becomes the anchor customer for everything that be it the launch companies are building like Skyroot, Agnikul, or even the satellite operators who are building Earth observation satellites or remote sensing and communication satellites. So I think one of the changes that we would like to see in this sector, and this is something that the government has taken a positive note of, is basically ensuring they are the first ones to buy the solution if it is indigenously built. So I think Make in India is also applicable in this particular aspect. It is just that the end users at this point in time are not quite aware on how can we leverage private sector capabilities. The second thing is Government of India has already started a venture capital fund, although it's not enough for space industry, 1,000 crore fund, which is again a positive move, but it is not at all sufficient given the scale of investment that this sector needs.
Thank you. Mr. Karnik, would you like to address the last question?
Yeah, people are greatly concerned about this, with the technology be autonomous and be like a sentient being of some kind. And yeah, one has seen some signs of that occasionally, and it's not new because the thought is old. If you go back to, many of you may have seen the movie, which derives from Arthur Clarke's book on 2001 Space Odyssey. The computer there takes over, basically. So, don't know, partly science fiction or partly it can happen, because given a certain mission to just do that. But I think humans will yet be in control. The more likely development is not autonomous technology or humans completely in control. It's likely to be a mix. And the mix can be, as I said earlier, a physical mix like biology and computers, but it can be other ways of just putting humans and computers to work together, as Professor Chaudhury said. Just two other comments from the earlier one, if I may, just 1 minute. I think one change, and those of you with international studies would particularly like to take this thought back, that, despite the great power of countries today, the state seems to have won back a lot of power from people, so to say. But you're going to see a change where companies become even more dominant. It already happened and going to happen much more as you get tech mega giants. They trade amongst themselves, they control the world, they control what you read, think, say, everything. So that's going to be something which will factor international relations, changing geoeconomics and geopolitics. Final comment, no, let me stop there. Thank you.
Santanu.
I had taken a stand which is slightly different in the sense that I said we did not bother about national borders, because as Professor Karnik stated that companies are taking over, but I wanted to put it back to as human being as their own owner of themselves come together and create ventures which really help human being. And that's a kind of an utopian thought of a different democracy for the technology to develop. Okay? But we need to think in a different way. Because we have actually seen all these political philosophies, economic philosophies, and which has dominated science and technology are definitely not, will not definitely survive. We have to think in a different way, and technology today is enabling us to do things in a completely different way. And that's where the empowerment of each and individual is critical, and technology can actually enable us to do that, provided we ourselves can create that ecosystem to sustain and have the diversity flourishing in terms of our thought. The imagination and creativity is the key for future, and that only diversity can support. Thank you.
Thank you. Only one question remains about imitation leading to innovation. I mean, there is this is actually up on my sleeves, because the economics literature on technology talks about stages of learning, which begins with imitation. So you can't really skip imitation. You have to learn to imitate, and then you move up the ladder. And it's like a 6 or 7 step process where you make a jump to this invention level where you are pushing the frontiers. So, I mean, it's not one or the other. Thank you very much for a very active session. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair and panelists, for your valuable insights. The discussion provided a deeper understanding of the role of technology and innovation, as well as emerging trends, obviously, with human being as a part of it. With this, we conclude the session. I request the students to please remain seated. The dignitaries can move for lunch. I request the students to please remain seated till further instructions. Thank you.